My name's Billy. I am a ex-member of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. I'm a person in long-term recovery, and I am chatting with Staxx.
Welcome to this episode of Chatting with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Billy. What's up, man?
What's up, brother?
How you doing?
I'm well. I am well.
Thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks for reaching out.
So you have a wild story, like a lot of my guests. You're a former club member.
Correct.
You're in recovery.
I am.
You have a lot of layers, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So where did your life begin?
And I think it all, you know what I mean? Everything that we go through in life shapes the person that, that we are today, right? Where did my story begin? When I think about my story is like I said, you know what I mean? Everything that made me who I am today, which is the recovery. So, I mean, really my story started when I was a little kid, growing up, in a kind of rough neighborhood, growing up in Providence. I grew up in the Junction. It's the Mantonville Junction. Grew up in a good family, 3 older brothers. As I had mentioned when we were talking earlier before, I grew up in Providence, but we had a summer home down in Narragansett. So it was almost like I lived 2 different lives, you know what I mean? And down there, I surfed and skateboarded and long hair and I fit in really well, with the people down there. And then we'd have to come home when the summer was over and came back to, you had to put on a whole different face when I came back to Providence, you know what I
Back
mean?
to the rough neighborhood, right?
Yeah. You know what I mean? And then there was the kids in the neighborhood, like, oh, this week you need to fight this guy, and this week you need to, and all that stuff there. So like really, really early on, and I bring this up because as we were talking before about, my addiction and everything, in hindsight, looking back on that, you know what I mean? It all kind of makes sense. You know what I mean? Like you had to be these different people at different times, you know what I mean? And when I read George Christie's book and I heard, in there that, he was a surfer and he felt that was like the first outlaw culture that he belonged to, you know what I mean? I was like, yeah, man, you know what I mean? Like I could identify that, you know what I mean? Because we were like outcasts, you know what I mean? Even in that world. But, I would say I had a pretty, normal upbringing. And like I said, there was this guy in the neighborhood used to ride this chopper, and he was probably not that much older than me. But, kind of like when you're younger, you know what I mean? You're not old enough to get in the bars. Everybody just seems, you know what I mean? Like even my brother that was closest in age to me was 9 years older than me. And when I was a little kid, you know what I mean? He just like would mess with me, you know what I mean? But once I'm 18 and he's, only, 27, you know what I mean? We're hanging out together, you know what I mean? And we're in the bars and stuff like that. So this guy here wasn't really that much older than me, and he comes into play later. But I was always enamored by that, you know what I mean? When I was a little kid, they used to have the ECMF, the East Coast mother. They were like the big club in Rhode Island. They'd rumble down the street and you'd just be like, wow, man, you know what I mean? And I always just thought it was cool, Yeah, long hair and motorcycles. And I was always attracted to that. But my parents were super, super strict, man. You know what I mean? They wouldn't allow me to, all my friends had like mini bikes and dirt bikes and, all that there. And my parents were just like so against it, so I'd be sneaking out with my buddy, you know what I mean? And going off to the woods and
riding theirs, right?
Yeah. And I got married really, really young. I got married, I think, right after I had turned 21. And the first thing I did was I went out and bought a motorcycle. My best friend, he rode it back from Connecticut. We bought it up in, I think it was in Danielson or something. We rode back, pouring rain. Took me up to Rhode Island College, and he, taught me how to ride the thing. So, and true story here. Swear to God, this is a true story. So I get married, and one of the gifts we got was because I'm old, right? It was a VCR, right? VHS. Way before Blockbuster, way before, it was like Steve's, video store. And I went in the store and I seen this tape. It was the Hells Angels Forever documentary. It was the very first tape that I ever rented. You know what I mean? We probably rented a couple other movies too. But I went home and I watched that, and I was just hooked, man. I was like, man, like that's what I want to do. Like this is what I want to do. Knew nothing about it. You know what I mean? Knew nothing about that world really. Bailey had just started riding a motorcycle, and fast forward 4 years later, I'm in a bar downtown Providence. I think it was Last Call Saloon or something like that. And this same guy from the neighborhood that I said I used to watch and be enamored with, he's in this bar and he's a member of this club called the Satan Serpents. They had just started September of '85, and I joined them at the end of that month. After I met him in the bar, I remember hearing him having a conversation saying, "We're going to be the first Hells Angels in the state of Rhode Island." And I heard that, and I was like, I want to be a part of this. So the next day I got with him. He brought me up to the vice president of the Satan Serpents house. I told him that I wanted to join his club. I started prospecting for them. It was a really quick process with them. I was a member in less than a month, and because we were so small, within another month or two, I was the secretary of the, I was an officer.
Were they Diamond Club?
So back then, they didn't really call clubs diamond clubs or anything. It was an outlaw club, right? It was a three-piece patch club. And like I said, you know what I mean? They supposedly had these intentions that they wanted to be, Hell's Angels someday. And, so I jumped on it. You know what I mean? I jumped on it. I got in it. And again, not really knowing much about that world, right? There was a Hell's Angel that lived out in, I believe he lived in Seekonk or Swansea, Massachusetts, but he was a member of the Lowell Charter. I mean, he was out of his mind, right? He was always just out there. I remember, we'd go and we'd hang around with him. You know what I mean? And that was my first exposure, to the Hells Angels. And I remember him, we kind of had some internal stuff going on with the person that was at the president at the time. It wasn't like a violent takeover or anything, but we kind of we sat down at church one night and said, listen, you know what I mean? Things aren't going the way that we think that it was really like a dictatorship is really what it was. And we said, listen, we've been talking to, we've been talking to this guy, and he's saying that, we're not doing the things, this isn't how things are done in the outlaw world. We didn't even want to throw the guy out. You know what I mean? We were just like, listen, we're going to have a change of structure here because this is what we want to do. Anyways, the guy, Jeff, said to us, listen, you guys are all welcome to come. Just don't bring that guy with you. He ended up bowing out, long story short. And we started hanging out with them. You know what I mean? We started hanging out with the guys in the Lowell Charter and then eventually the Salem Charter. But again, in order to put in a bid for a charter in a state where there were no charters yet, you had to be a club for 5 years. So we started in 1985, just, getting to know them. You know what I mean? Going to parties, hanging out. We started with about 22 members. And by the time we got a charter, it dwindled. Let's just say
Was it
that.
5 years? Did you guys wait 5 years until?
So we had to. You know what I mean? They knew that was our intention, but before we could become an official hang around club, we had to have 5 years, and 50% of the members had to be 5-year members or more.
So you could have went there and prospected and became a member way faster than if you.
Yeah, 100%. And there's a story to that too. So we start the process, knowing that this is what we want to do. 2 people left and went and prospected on their own to Lowell in the Lowell Charter. Neither one of them made it. Even at one point, the guy that I was closest to in the club, he was getting frustrated. And he was like, I don't want to wait. And he was ready to leave and go up and hang around and prospect on his own. And I told him, listen, I talked him into staying. I'm like, just give us a few more months. We're almost 5 years. If we can't get everybody to do this and be on board with this, then I'll go with you. You know what I mean? And we'll go together. And, a few more things happened over the time. We basically brought it to a vote. And I want to say there was probably maybe 11, maybe 12 of us that decided this is what we want to do. The other guys left, good terms. You know what I mean? They just didn't want to be part of that. They went and did their own thing. And then, we went up, we all went up as a charter up to Lowell, stated our intentions.
You bring your cuts with you when you guys go?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. You know what I mean? Because by this time we had been hanging out with them for years. You know what I mean? They knew
Yeah.
us. We were close. You know what I mean? It wasn't like we were strangers. They knew the whole, and in the same light, there were members that were grooming us. You know what I mean? Because they wanted to see the club grow.
Yeah.
There hadn't been another new charter in the United States, in the East Coast of the United States, for like 10 years.
They already had a chapter in Connecticut?
So there was a charter in Connecticut before us, but the charter was inactive at the time because most of the members were in jail. And at the same time, there were a couple of guys that were hanging around and prospecting for one of the Massachusetts charters. And what their intention was that once they got their patches, they were going to go back and restart the charter in Connecticut. It was Bridgeport was the charter at the time, and they did do that. And then some of the other members got out of jail, and that charter thrived.
Do you
Yeah.
have a big meeting and do you give them your cuts? Like,
Yeah,
how
no.
does the process work?
So yeah, there's really no patch over. So and I don't know if things have changed. We're talking 1988, 89. You know what I mean? When we started this whole process. Well, before that, it was 1985 when we stated our intentions, but we had to be a club for 5 years. We went up. We got invited to an East Coast officers meeting. Of course, we were on the outside. We were never invited in, but we got to meet other charters from around what they called. So the East Coast was everything except California and Alaska at the time. That's what they considered the East Coast. I don't
But
know
they
if that.
didn't have tons of charters everywhere. It was like
No,
very minimum, right?
no, yeah. I want to say at the time there was 3 charters in Massachusetts. There was, I want to say, 2 in New York. There was New York City and the Nomad charter, where they were kind of like in Schenectady. There were 2 in. There were 3 in the Carolinas. I think there was 2 in North Carolina, 1 in South Carolina. There was 1 in Minnesota. There was 1 in Omaha, Nebraska. Oh, Rochester, New York. So there was 3 in New York, and I think that was it at the
And
time.
Chicago wasn't
No, Chicago
rolling yet.
came
That
after
was in the
us.
90s.
Yep,
Yep.
Chicago came after us, right after us, as a matter of fact. So we went up there. You know what I mean? We kind of stated our intentions, and then I don't remember timelines wise. They had to actually vote us in as a hang around club, and we kept our patches right through then. You know what I mean? We was Satan Serpents Motorcycle Club was the name of the club. We stated our intentions. They had to vote on us to make us quote official hangarounds. And then you start that process of going around, and like we already knew a lot of the people in the local area in Massachusetts. We had to start getting to know everybody else, because everybody votes on you. It's one man, one vote, and it's 100% in. You know what I mean? Or you know what I mean? If every single person in the charter needs to vote yes for you to get a charter yes, and you need to get every single charter to say yes. So every single member, in essence, has to say yes. One
Yeah.
person could
One person ruin
crush
everything.
the whole thing. And we started that process. It took us in total, because we had to be a club for 5 years before they would even consider it. It took us 7.5 years to actually get the charter. So we were
So
the
were you
club
guys
for 5 years.
riding to all these different
Oh yeah.
charters all over
Oh
the
yeah.
country?
Oh yeah. Yep. And we, yeah. Yeah. It
Any
was
situations happen when you guys are doing this process? Anything that makes you think, damn, I don't know if I should do this?
not for me, you know what I mean? And I would say probably not for. So like I said, I think we started when we became, what they call official hangarounds. I want to say there was probably maybe 14 or 15 of us. And then, we dwindled, you know what I mean? Some people quit. Some people we threw out, because we didn't think that they were, pulling their weight. After that hang around period, they vote you in as a prospect charter. And that's when we give up our cuts, and we just got the Rhode Island bottom rockers. You know what I mean?
So
And then
the
we were
club's no
prospects.
more. Once you give up the
Correct.
cuts, the
Yeah,
club is
Satan
gone.
Serpents are no longer. Yeah. And then we started that process of becoming, prospects. And and we needed to do a lot of traveling. We need to go. Basically, you had to get to know everybody in the club, like really on a personal level. And it took a long time. You know what I mean? And we got brought up a couple of times for membership and we got shut down. And I believe, if I remember correctly, that you can only be brought up 3 times. And if you're not voted in on the third time, you're done. We got brought up really, really, really early on, way too early on. And I can't remember how many charters said yes and how many said no. But then the second time we got brought up, it was probably a year or so as prospects in, because it took us 13 and a half months as hang-arounds and prospects. We were up in Laconia. Everybody had voted. We were waiting on one charter's vote. And the people that were there from that charter kept calling the people back home, what's going on? Come on, we're waiting, we're waiting, we're waiting. And this is a charter who had already voted yes for us the first time around.
But that vote doesn't matter, right? It could change.
They got so pissed off. They were like, you know what? It no. And they voted no the second time because people were hassling them. Like, come on. You know what I mean? Man. So it was the third time around. And back then, that was the deal. If you didn't get voted in on the third time around, you get sent down the road. And we got our charter. We were out in Minneapolis, Minnesota when we got our charter.
Do they give you the patches right then?
Right there and then. Yeah. Well,
what's that?
Yeah.
What's that like?
Basically, people in the room kind of give you their patch to wear. In that whole process, we ended up at somebody's house and somebody's wife or something had a sewing machine, and everybody got all their stuff sewed on right then and there. Probably took us 2 weeks to get home from Minnesota after that happened. It was a bit of a party going on after that. So
now, when you get home, do you guys have a clubhouse? And so what's the atmosphere like when you guys get home?
Yeah, so we had a clubhouse as the old club, you know what I mean? And we still had that place, but it was a place that we rented. We eventually, bought our own building. It was kind of like a 3-story building. So we had some apartments there in the clubhouse and whatnot, on the different floors and stuff like that. So
you guys have members living there?
That was down the road. You know what I mean? That wasn't right away. Right away, we had the same place that we had rented. And at one point during this whole process, I'm still not sure to this day, but the clubhouse got bombed. I was in the clubhouse when it got bombed. This was before I can't even remember if we were prospects then or no, we weren't. No, we were.
But
still
whoever it was knew what was going on, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And ATF shows up, and all the DEA and.
Can you walk
Basically,
me through?
what happened was
walk me through.
Driving by and they took a pipe on him and they threw it. And they said if the bomb had landed on the roof, it would have killed everybody in the building. It somehow missed the roof. I remember hearing a thump because something hit the side of the building. So basically, what happened was they drove by, they threw it, it hit the side of the building, and then it hit the ground. And the next thing I know, the wall just it was almost like it was in slow motion. And the wall just opened up, you know what I mean? And just everything went flying. But the ground absorbed most of the blast. There were chunks of metal stuck in the and there was, I want to say there were 4 or 5 of us in the building at the time, and nobody had a scratch on them. It was just a straight mirror. But again, that was when we were still the old club.
Any other situations happen, and do you guys have rivals back then? Did you come across any other clubs?
So we did. It wasn't it wasn't of any significance. It wasn't like it is now. Like in that same area now, obviously the Rhode Island Charter is still there, but there are, there's outlaws, there's pagans, there's everything in this area. And when we were coming up, it wasn't like that. You know what I mean? There were clubs that supported those other clubs. You know what I mean? I still don't anyways know to this day who was behind the bombing. You know what I mean? There were suspicions of who it could have been. Nobody was ever arrested or anything, like that. So, but now, in the same area, everybody's here. You know what I mean? You've got outlaws here, you've got pagans, you've got everything up here.
And it's a small area.
Very small area. Yeah, very
I'm surprised more things don't transpire there with it being so small and all the people in such a tight location.
Yeah, well, part does happen, and I'm kind of so far removed from it right now. I don't really know. I know that through the years, there's always been, folks that have tried on both sides that have tried truces, and there's been many truces, and then they were broken, and you know what I mean? So I don't know right now if, you know what I mean, they're very well maybe, you know what I mean, like a truce between all of them, you know, because really who wins in the end? You know what I mean? Law enforcement wins in the end. You know what I mean? The
Yep.
clubs never win. You know what I mean? We end up going to jail or we end up killing one another. You know what I mean? And the cops kind of just sit there and come in and sweep up the mess afterwards, right? So I really don't know. You know what I mean? Other than like what I see, you know, in the media and stuff like that. You know what I mean? I don't know, you know, who's at war with who and who's not. You know what I mean? There very well could just be a truce and they're all coexisting for all I know right now. You know,
So
you gotta realize I've been out of the club for 29 years.
yeah, like we got to let the people know, like this isn't anything recent. This is
Yeah,
his
no,
story.
good Lord, no. It's a whole nother lifetime ago.
So you
Yeah.
guys get your patches, you go back to the state. Are people treating you different?
Uh, I I don't think so. You know what I mean? I think that, you know what I mean, the Satan Serpents had their own reputation in the state. You know, Rhode Island's a really small state as it is, and we had a lot of support from the local clubs when we stated our intentions about what we were going to do. You know what I mean? There was not a lot of rivalry that went on in the state between motorcycle clubs. We were all pretty much, you know, we hung out and we partied with each other. You know what I mean? There wasn't a
Yeah.
lot of, but then again, there also wasn't like any major, it wasn't any of the major clubs in the state. You know what I mean? So, and in fact, there weren't even a lot of the major clubs really in the region. You know what I mean? You had to go down to you know, New York, Jersey, and stuff like that before. You know what I mean? It's not like it is today. Now everybody's everywhere. You know what I mean? All the major
Yeah.
clubs are everywhere. So,
It's
uh,
it exploded in popularity
yeah,
recently.
yeah, yeah. So
So what happens next when you guys get back to Rhode Island?
it was great. You know what I mean? It was I won't deny it. You know what I mean? It was one of the most memorable times in my life. We're very proud. I mean, it wasn't an easy feat. You know what I mean? The there hadn't been another new Hell's Angel charter in 10 years on the quote East Coast, right? And what they considered East Coast at the time was everything except for, and it may be the same now, I don't know. It was everything but Alaska and California. You know what I mean? Everything. It, West Coast was California and Alaska, and East Coast was everything else. We were in Canada at the time. I was actually made East Coast representative to Canada, so I had to go to all the Canada offices meetings. They did that because I was the only that didn't have a record and I could get across the border easier than everybody else.
Now I believe if you're in the club, there is no getting across the
No,
border anymore.
yeah.
No.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I've even hesitated even just trying to go to Canada because, you know what I mean, they just keep that in their files forever. You know what I mean? They're not going to be like, oh, this guy's been out for 20 years now. He's
Yeah.
good. We can let him in, right? But that was another thing that was really cool. You know what I mean? Being able to get into Canada and go up there and have that role, you know, so early on. You know what I mean?
How was it? How did people treat you up in Canada?
Oh, like gold, unbelievable. Yeah, absolutely. I got married when I was in the club, and we went up there for our honeymoon, and they just rolled out the red carpet. Absolutely amazing. You know, so yeah, it was a great time. You know what I mean? Until it wasn't. You know what I mean?
Is there
Um,
any notable figures you met when you were up in Canada?
Yeah, I mean, you name it, everybody, you know.
Mom Boucher?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to, you know what I mean. I don't want to be the, you know, I don't know if I feel comfortable, you know what I mean, mentioning names, but you know, unfortunately, mom has passed away. I'll tell you a funny story. At one point, I was looking, and I eventually did transfer out of the Rhode Island charter. I ended up going to New York City charter, which was in Manhattan at the time. I was going out on a run. There was a guy down from Montreal. This guy Ben. He couldn't speak English all that good, and we were talking about, you know, all sorts of stuff, and you know, we're partying, and you know, communications are getting crossed, and he for some reason thought that I wanted to transfer to the Montreal charter, and he mistakenly brought that back to his charter unbeknownst to me, and then I got this call saying that they took it to a vote. And there were a few people that voted no, one of them being my mom. And I was like, no, that's not what I was saying.
You just said you like going up there. You don't want to move up there.
Yeah, and hey, let me tell you what, they had it going on up there, man. Let me tell you. But yeah, so I eventually transferred. I transferred down to the New York City charter.
What's the reason for the transfer?
I want to say that I was having internal struggles with people in my own charter. We were not seeing things eye to eye. That was probably the biggest reason in it. Because of that position that I was in as the East Coast rep to Canada, I got to meet a lot of members from all over the world, at different, officers meetings and stuff like that there. I formed a lot of really, really good relationships. And at the time, I would say that I felt disconnected from my own charter. I felt like I was banging heads with a lot of the people there. In hindsight, I'll look back and tell you that I didn't know it at the time, but you and I briefly talked before. I had a serious drug problem, man. You know what I mean? So a lot of what was probably going on in my head was skewed. You know what I mean? I probably wasn't seeing things straight. I was seeing them, in a crooked way. That caused me to not want to be, part of that organization anymore. And so I started, looking around. At the time, again, 30 some odd years ago, I was pretty well known because we did, when we first prospected, there was a core of us. Like, you do it as a team, right? And there's a core of us. We have one guy that, has this great job, with Caterpillar, and another guy's got a great job actually working for the city, and another guy's, got this great job working for, and then there were people like me that, had jobs at the local, rental company, the Rhode
Yeah,
Island
but
Rental.
everybody in the charter had a job, right? It wasn't anyone just loafing on the couch, jumping around. Did
Yeah,
everybody have a job?
pretty much. You know what I mean? Some people were mechanics, you know what I mean? And they kind of, worked on their own schedule and stuff like that. But basically what we would try and do is the people that actually had like jobs, real jobs that were important when you want to go buy a piece of property, right? To put somebody's name on there that actually has, so what happened was there was a core of us that had to go out and do like a lot of the traveling to get to know everybody, especially during the prospecting period. You know what I mean? You needed to have certain, amount of people, present. At some points, everybody had to be present, but we tried to do the best that we could internally to protect the people that had like really good jobs, right? Because
Yeah.
when we go to get a mortgage, you know what I mean? Those people, you need those people, right? So the people like me who, I could get a job anywhere, being a laborer or whatever, you know what I mean? So I was out on the road a lot, which in turn was good for me because I got to build relationships, personal relationships with people all over the country. So when it came time where I was looking to do that, when I was looking to move, I had relationships. And as a matter of fact, when I decided to go to New York and I told somebody I was close there with, he actually said to me, he said, you're all set. He goes, we already voted on it. He said, you can come here anytime you want, but you also have to get your own charter's permission. And I did. I eventually moved. But today, looking back, you know what I mean? I can tell you that, I probably made mistakes in that, you know what I mean? Because I was up most of the time. You know what I mean? I'm thinking all of this stuff and I'm feeling like that I'm not welcomed, in my own home charter. And it was
Yeah.
probably, pretty far from the truth. So I transferred, I went down to Manhattan, went down to the New York City charter.
Is this when Big Vin or Big Vin's
Oh, good
already?
Lord. No. That was way before me. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
So we got our charter in 92. I transferred down there at the end of 93. Big Vinny, Sandy, all of that stuff was 70s and 80s stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sandy, I actually met Sandy Alexander after I moved down there because they still had a relationship with him. There was something going on with so I guess his name was on that building of the clubhouse. He was technically the owner of it and he was no longer in the club. I don't really know, all the ins and outs of it, but I actually did get to meet Sandy down there. He wasn't in the club at the time.
What did you think of Sandy?
In some ways I was, enamored, you know what I mean? It's Sandy Alexander, man. You know what I mean? Like he's a legend, you know what I mean?
Even if he's not in the club, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, no, for sure. I mean, look at George Christie, man. You know what I mean? He'll always be a Hell's Angel legend. Come on, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sonny Barger, you know what I mean? Got to meet
John the
Sonny a bunch
Baptist,
of times.
right? All these
Oh yeah,
guys, John the
sure,
Baptist, he's a
yeah,
legend too.
yeah, absolutely, yep.
So
Um,
what's it like when you transfer? What's like your first going over there? You move to New York City?
yeah, yeah, up and moved. It was again, it was a struggle for me. You know what I mean? It was a it took 2 more years before I ended up getting thrown out. Right? It was a struggle. You know what I mean? Like all of my hustles were back in Rhode Island. You know what I mean? And I went down there, and you always think the grass is greener on the other side, right? You know what I mean? And then you get somewhere, and you're like, oh, between struggling financially and the problem that I didn't realize I had back then. I struggled. You know what I mean? It basically it ate me alive. You know what I mean? That's really what happened. It was fun in the beginning. You know what I mean? It was I was down there for a couple of years and stuff before I started getting in fucking trouble. Right?
Did the
Uh,
cops mess with you at all during this time?
well, fucking the cops messed with you all the time just because you were in the club.
Was that happening in Rhode Island?
Oh no, I mean, yeah, for sure, it was happening, but that had nothing to do with my transfer. You know what I mean? I again at the time just felt really disconnected. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
just did not feel part of that charter. And we had talked earlier. So I'm in recovery now. I've been in recovery for 6.5 years, 16 and a half years. But at the time I didn't realize, you know what I mean, that I had a problem. You know what I mean? And I didn't
Yeah.
realize how much that was affecting like my life and the decisions that I was making and because for the longest time I was a really good member, you know what I mean? And then I wasn't, man, you know what I mean? And again, like I said before, I'm not going to sit here and blame it on, you know what I mean? I take full responsibility for my actions and what ended up happening and all that stuff there. But the had a lot to do with it, you know what I mean?
Were
When
you
you're not
getting
in the
into
right frame
fights
of
with
mind.
anybody in the club? Did you get into conflict with people? Like,
Conflict, yeah. I was in conflict with some of the guys in Rhode Island, which led me to leave, but never, no physical fights. You know what I mean, or anything like that.
New York either? Once you get there, there's no.
No, no. Well, there was one guy there that kind of old school member. My very first church there called me out and said, what he said when I got in the club, which was probably 20 years prior to me being there. He said you used to have to fight everybody before we'd vote on you. And of course, what did I have to do? I had to fucking stand up and say, well, if that's what we got to do, right? And then he grabbed me and started laughing. And he's like, I'm kidding, brother. We don't do that no more. You know what I
That's
mean?
it. They mud check you. That's what that's
Yeah, oh
called,
shit.
right?
Well,
Mud checking.
when I was a prospect and whatnot, prospect and hang around, yeah, you got mud checked all the time.
But have you seen anything like? So you're a member of this charter. Do you see any situations happen from the outside, like happening in front of you, like where they beat someone down or the anything that rings a bell that you remember?
Meaning amongst members?
Yeah, either amongst members or when you're out, maybe a
Well, I mean,
situation happened.
come on, Bill. People got beat up.
Yeah,
But no,
absurd.
not really internally. No, you know what I mean. Members would have their squabbles. You know what I mean, and they'd work them out. And sometimes they'd work them out, with words, and sometimes they'd work them out, with fist or whatever. But at the end of the day, you know what I mean. You'd hug the guy, and you know what I mean. You were brothers, and that was that. You know what I mean. All that stuff there. Outsiders, sure, there was going on all the time.
What
You
about
know,
parties? What were the parties like there in New York City?
crazy, bro. It was just crazy. When I first got there, there were a few of us, talking and whatnot, and this was my downfall. You know what I mean? This was my downfall. Was I remember this one member saying, you know what I mean? And I'm going to tell you right now, I don't want to sit. I won't sit here and name names of
No,
people,
you don't have
uh,
to.
in a good light or a bad light. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I remember first getting there, and this one member that I was pretty close with. He was the president at the time, and he said we have the daytime members, we have the nighttime members. He said, and then we have the all the time members. And he looked at me and he goes, and that's me and you, right? Because it was 24/7. You know what I mean? Up for days at a time, partying, just no sleep. And eventually that ate me alive, right? I didn't know it then, right? I know it now, right? I'm in recovery now, right? I'm a recovering drug addict, right? I didn't then think I was a drug addict. You know what I mean? Back then, my philosophy was if you can't handle this, it's because you're weak,
Yeah.
right? You know, so you know what I mean.
Just
So
what
I was
we
one of
do,
all
right? This is just
right,
how we live. Yeah.
right, right. So and being in that charter, there were tons of people that's a New York is a major hub, right? That's where everybody flies into from just normal naturally in life, right? So whenever members would come in from anywhere, they would land there, and it was up to us to entertain them. And I was on the entertainment committee, and it ate me alive, man. It ate me alive. The reality is I ended up getting thrown out. You know what I mean? I was on that crew of go, 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 go all the time. And not knowing anything about addiction at the time, it ate me alive, bro. It ate me alive. At one point, I lost my patch down there. And they busted me down a prospect.
What was that over? Like how? And can you
Money.
walk me through when they took your
So I
patch?
so I owed money to somebody, another prospect. I was waiting on a check coming in, and it took way too long for it to come in, and eventually they busted me down to prospect until I was able to make right on that money. And as soon as I made right on it, you know what I mean, I got my patch back. But you know what I mean, it was just you could just already see the storm brewing. You know what I mean, like fucking
So what do
just
they do? They tell you give us your patch, so
well,
you are riding around with nothing.
well, no, I was a prospect again. I had my
So
bottom
they
rock.
Wow. So they take your full patch, your cut. They give
Yeah.
you a prospect cut, and you're just riding around with a prospect
Yeah,
patch now.
yeah, and because of the circumstances
Wow.
that surrounded it, you know what I mean? It wasn't like a violent thing or anything. They were like, "Listen, you're not doing the right thing. You need to make right on this financially. And until you can do that, you're gonna be a prospect again." You know what I
Was it
mean?
over?
But no, it was over money that I owed. I owed money.
Yeah, but did you owe money because of?
No, no, no. I was literally waiting on an insurance check so that I could rebuild my motorcycle, and it just took forever. So eventually, you know what I mean? Everybody that I owed the money got paid the money, but they waited too long. You know what I mean?
Looking back, would you have borrowed the money from them?
Sure, you know what I mean? Probably because in my mind, I never thought that stuff was going to happen. You know what I mean? I will say that when it did happen, I wasn't 100% sure I'd get my patch back. You know what I mean? But you know what I mean? It really, it was exactly what it was. You know what I mean? Come straight on the money, and we'll vote you back in.
Yeah, but does that give you like a little bit of animosity, them taking the
No,
patch from you?
it,
Like what
it
the?
did. It didn't at the time. It didn't at the time. Honestly, they could have sent me down the road right then and there. You know what I mean? They could have just said, you know what, fuck you. You ain't got what it takes. Get the fuck out. You know what I mean? Maybe
Now,
thump.
during this time, until then, have you seen them kick people out? And what was the situations like?
I want to say, if I, this is a long time ago, Bill.
I mean, you don't have
I,
to say any names.
I want to say while I was there, I want to say, well, while I was in New York, you know what I mean? I want to say I seen them throw one person out. Rhode Island, we threw people out, you know what I mean? While I was still a member up there, I was part of that, you know what I mean? Because of whatever the situation was where they weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing. You know what I mean? And I'll be honest with you, I probably didn't get thrown out in the beginning in New York because a lot of I was very close to a lot of the key players, and I had a really good reputation, and everybody was like, "Hey, he's just a little down on his luck right now. He's going to straighten this all out. He's going to come around." What I didn't know at the time was that I was a drug addict. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? And how much that really affected, what was going on in my head. You know what I mean? And honestly, I moved to New York City, and just New York City alone, right? It's a 24/7 city, right? And then, in the club, you know what I mean? It's really 24/7. And it just ate me alive, man. It ate me up alive. I on that level, right? Like I failed. You know what I mean? I couldn't keep up with it. I
Yeah.
struggled making money. I didn't have a hustle down there, so I had to get a real job. Trying to find a real job that was conducive with club life was difficult, and I just struggled. I struggled and struggled and struggled, and then it finally caught up with me.
What kind of other bad decisions were you making? What led up to you getting booted?
Continuing to get high was the biggest thing, you know what I mean? Because that just skews everything. It skews absolutely everything, you know? I could give you all the excuses in the book that I got down there and, you know, I wasn't from the city, so trying to get my footing, you know, I'm bouncing in this place, bouncing in that place, and trying to fulfill all my obligations with the club. And I'm spinning my wheels, and I never really got established financially so that I could, you know, succeed, if you will. You know what I mean? And I'm getting every day. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
What are you
Not
using?
not a good recipe for success.
Are you using in there?
No, a lot of alcohol, a lot of fucking alcohol. Yeah. So yeah, and it ate me up, man. It absolutely ate me up.
So you no arrests, nothing out there in New York?
No, no arrests in New York. I had some in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, nothing in New York. It was really just that fast paced lifestyle that and the, you know what I mean, you know,
Walk
making
me
bad decisions and
Yeah. Walk me through the day that they tell you, "Give us your patch, get the hell out of here."
yeah. eh, I could tell you this, right? 29 and a half years later, it's still an internal struggle that I deal with every day because it was it was so woven into my fabric of my life that having that ripped away, you know what I mean? I would say that there's probably still some type of a hole from that, right? From losing that, you know what I mean? As you can see, it's still me, and it was almost 30 years ago. You said walk you through what the day that it happened?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was almost like I knew it was coming too. You know what I mean? I had made a series of mistakes, and basically what it came down to was I took money that did not belong to me. There was a member that had left his jacket in the clubhouse, so the clubhouse was kind of a mini casino. There were all sorts of machines, and at times that's how I would make some money to get by, right? Because I just couldn't find regular steady work. I didn't have a hustle down there, so I really struggled financially. And it started so much longer before that. There was one point we all had to come up with $3,000 to
As a
go
whole?
each to
Each.
donate to the quote war chest or whatever. We, you know, whatever it was, we had to come up with the money. And I really struggled with it because I wasn't working. I didn't have a hustle down there. And there was a girl at the time, she was actually my ex, and she came down, gave me the money. She said, I'm not going to see you get thrown out of this club over money. Gave me the money for that. So I just thought I was just always struggling. And like I said, you know, it was the drugs, you know what I mean? You and I talked earlier, and I've been clean now for 16 and a half years. And my life is quite a bit different than what it used to be. But anyways, down there, so she had given me that money, and that kind of like saved me at that point. And then, you know, one night I'm in there and I'm gambling and I'm gambling and I'm trying to, you know, and I'm falling behind the eight ball, and a member had left money in his vest, and I knew it was in there. He had told me it was in there, and I started gambling with that, thinking, "Oh, I'll get back on top and I'll win it all."
And
Of
you
course,
lost it all.
I lost it all,
How much
and
was
I've
it?
been up for days.
How much
So
was
that,
it around, you know?
it wasn't like a ton. I want to say it was,
I don't care if it was $10, they would throw you out. Doesn't matter if it was how
well,
much it was, right?
from doing what. But so here was the hit, right? I had the money with a girl that I was seeing, and I couldn't get in touch with her.
Oh
So I
my
knew
god.
I'm going to use it. I'm going to replace it tomorrow. But I'm up for like a week. So I pass out, and I'm out for 2 days. I wake up, hey, somebody stole so and so's money. And I'm like, oh. So I get in touch with her. She brings me the money. I grab the member, bring him into my apartment. I'm like, listen, this is what happened. I shouldn't have taken it without your permission. Here's the money. I replace it. Damage already done. You know
Oh,
what I mean? Now, he
man.
doesn't say anything to me, but he goes and talks to other members and like, hey, this is what happened. And then at some point they must have got together and talked about it. And the next thing everybody's in my apartment and they're talking about it, and I'm trying to explain my way out of it. And there might have been a couple of people there that were like, okay, well, maybe it's not stealing from a member, right? The majority of the people said it was stealing from a member. And then the next thing you know, I'm in the hospital for 29 days.
They beat you down.
I burnt my tattoos off. Yeah. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
So you don't remember anything from when they're like questioning you?
There wasn't really a lot of questioning, man. You know what I mean? It was like, what happened? What did you do? I explained what I do. And I want to say that they went and talked a little bit on the side and came back in. And the next thing you know, one of the guys that I was closest to threw the first punch like he should have, and I'd love to tell you that I stood there and, put in a good fight. But, when you're fighting 12, 13 people, it didn't take too long, you know.
So when you wake up, your tattoos are removed.
I don't think I ever passed out. I think I was so that I was like impossible to pass out. You know what I mean?
So they burned them off.
My back, they did.
You had a
So
whole back piece?
I had a full patch on my back.
Wow.
So they burnt that. But the fucked up part was, I guess, when you burn it, it doesn't look like it's coming off. So then eventually I get brought to a tattoo parlor, and they blacked out my other club tattoos, and then they started blacking that out as well through the burns. Blacked out my other club tattoos, and then they started blacking that out as well through the burns. And then brought eventually at the end of it all, brought me to a hotel, dropped me off, and basically you stay on your side of the street, we'll stay on ours.
But this is your whole life at this time, right?
Yeah.
What about your motorcycle? Where did your motorcycle go? What happens with that?
Motorcycles, I signed it over. I signed over the title.
Wow.
It's kind of an unwritten thing, you know what I mean? Back then they used to say, if you're not a Hell's Angel, you don't need a motorcycle. That's what they used to say to people when they would get thrown out of the club, So, yeah. So, and then I was in the hospital for 29 days.
29 days.
Yeah.
With the burns on your back and
Yeah, the burns and stuff. Yep. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
So what
Yeah.
are you thinking when you're in the hospital? Does anyone from the club ever reach out to you again?
Mm-mm. No.
And these are the guys that you're closest with.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so here's my hit, right? The two guys, or two of the guys that I was closest to, I feel that if they were there, I either would not have been thrown out or I would not be alive.
Because it'd be one or the other. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I probably walked away a lot luckier than, well, I say lucky then, right? But today I'll say that I was just blessed, right? And today, you know what I mean? I'll say that everything that I've gone through in my life has led me to who I am and what I do today. And like we've discussed before, you know what I mean? I've been in recovery now for 16 and a half years. I've gotten to help a lot of people that were just like me recover from. If I don't know if you ever watch the Patched podcast.
yeah, shout out to Mooch, shout out to Jason.
Yeah, Jason and Mooch. A lot of the guys that they have interviewed, talk about, they're kind of coming through like all of that trauma that you experience while you're in the club. I have been able to very recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, run into people that were members. One that was a member in the Rhode Island charter after I had transferred, but I knew him and I ran into him, at a recovery meeting. Didn't know who it was at first. Been able to kind of help him through that process. You know what I mean? When he was like early on in his recovery, and then I ran into another guy that I didn't know from a different area, and he had reached out to me, and I want to think, or at least I feel that I've been able to help them in their recovery process, because it's a bit, you know what I mean? Substance use and addiction and recovery is its own thing, but bringing that into the motorcycle club world is a whole nother aspect to the whole thing. You know what I mean?
I always thought that they don't like when people are like really addicted to drugs, but some people are functioning,
I mean, they don't. You know what I mean? It's never pushed on you. You don't have to. You know what I mean? But it's just part of that lifestyle. You know what I mean? I was addicted to way before. You know what I mean? I ever even joined a motorcycle club.
Yeah, but like on the West Coast, I see all these people in pictures with balloons and like, when is this acceptable? I just like,
I don't know. It's not for me to sit and judge. You know what I mean? Because I was right there. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
I truly believe this, right? That I am the person that I am today, whatever that person is, right? I am that person today because of everything that I went through in my life, all of
yeah.
it. Who I am today, not just the good, not just the bad. You know what I mean? It all shaped me into the person that I am today. And now that's what I do for a living. You know what I mean? I help other people and I've done that for the past 15 years of my life. You know what I mean? I work in the substance use field, and I'm a licensed clinician. It's just crazy, but I've used my experience. You know what I mean, to be able to help other people like myself, get to the other side. It's and but here's the hit, right? I still sit here and struggle with my past. You know what I mean? Because that was so much a part of who I was, and to have lost it, you know what I mean, through no fault of anybody's but my own, right? So there's still a lot of shame and guilt that I deal with over that, you know what I mean? Because at the time, you know what I mean, I was a well-known member, and I was a well-known member for like being there and doing what it needed to be done when it needed to be done. And to fall from that is it's hard, you know what I mean? It's hard to swallow. It's been, what did I say? It's coming, it'll be 30
30,
years
30.
next year, right? So 29 and a half years later, I still have reoccurring dreams of, in my mind, failing at that. You know what I mean? That I
Yeah,
let all those people down. You know what I mean? That I was, you know what I mean? Because at one point I was held in somewhat of a regard in
yeah.
that world.
As a high standing member in good standing,
Right,
basically, right?
right. So, you know,
Now, those people that did that to you that day, the guy that you took the money from, all this stuff, if they were sitting here right now, what would you say to them all these years later?
uh, yeah, it probably will sound like really up, just because I really feel that I failed them. Still to this day, I feel that I failed them. You know what I mean? Those were
Because
my
you
brothers.
never
And
got to explain yourself, really, like, right?
now, nobody wants to hear that explanation. You know what I mean? I can tell you this: when you're in, you're in. When you're out, you're out. And it doesn't matter if it's me, George Christie, or
Judge
any
Zito,
when you're in,
this
you're in.
guy.
When you're out, you're out.
But
You
when
know?
you're in, do you feel like this ain't gonna end? This is my whole life. This is
Of
what
course
I
you do.
know,
Of
right?
course you do. Yeah,
And
of
then
course you do.
boom, the bus stops
Of
and
course you
things
do.
are different. So that's what I want to talk to you next about.
Sure.
After you're out, you get home from the hospital. Where did your life go next?
A lot of inner demon fighting, right? A lot of feelings of failure. A lot of, because being part of that organization, you know what I mean? Although I was only a member, an actual member for 3 years, there was a whole 7-year process prior to that becoming, to be able to become a member.
So it's basically 10 years of your
10
life.
so 10 years. So, you're lost. You know what I mean? That defined who I was for so long. I was lost, felt even today. I will still sit here and say that I sometimes will feel like I failed at that. You know what I mean? I would not have the life that I have today, though, probably if I had succeeded at that, if you want to call it. You know what I mean? So I was lost, man. I was absolutely lost. I'm from Rhode Island. I'm out now on Long Island at some friggin' hospital that I ended up at. I get out and they basically, I had nowhere to go. I had nothing. I
You had
literally
your
left.
apartment though, right? You had your apartment still
Dude,
in New York?
what apartment? My apartment was in the clubhouse.
Oh,
I lived on
no.
the fifth floor of the clubhouse. That was my apartment.
Oh,
I no longer
man.
had a motorcycle. I had sold my car before I moved to Manhattan because you don't need a car in Manhattan. I
Everything
literally
you
left.
owned was in there, right? In the
I literally
apartment.
left with a pair of work boots, a pair of jeans, and a shirt. That was it.
Wow.
So I end up in this, I don't even know what you call it, boarding house or something. Somehow, I number one, I got the best. I ended up at some hospital in Southampton. The doctor who operated on me, he was like the greatest friggin' dude I ever met in my life. He did the operation and whatnot. Knew I didn't. He hooked me up with some type of organization that you had to apply for this, that, and the other, and it would cover like your hospital bills and all that stuff and whatnot. So I get out of that. I'm in like this group home, which was a horrible experience. But like that's how busted out I am, right? Like that's how, you know what I mean, down on, like I got nothing. I got nothing. I could just, who am I calling, right? Am I
You
calling?
got bandages all on your back,
Oh
right?
yeah, I'm a mess. To call my parents, but you know what I mean. I'm even embarrassed to do that, right? Because, anyways, I end up in this group home or whatever. They set me up with some type of medical help. I have an appointment with that doctor at his office in a few weeks for follow up. I eventually, within a week or so, decided, you know what, I gotta go home, right? I call mommy and daddy, right? I call them up. Like, I gotta come home. I don't really tell them what's going on. I tell them when I was in a car accident, when I need to come home and lick my wounds or whatever. So my dad sends me train money and some money to get some food. I decide I'm gonna go home. I was just, it was a mess. It was just an absolute mess. And that was, again, 29 years ago. I ended up going home and pretty much licking my wounds. I'll say that when I left, I had a phone call with one of the members the day after, and basically was told, "You stay on your side of the street. We'll stay on our side of the street." You know what I mean? Nobody's looking for you. Nobody's, whatever. It's done. You know what I mean? It's done. It's over. So I went home. I stayed with my parents for a while. I mean, I was fucked up for like years. You know what I mean? I probably drowned myself, in booze and and muddle through the next, I don't know how many years of my life until I was able to find, myself into recovery and did a whole 180 after that. You know what I mean? But it was a struggle for a long time. Didn't know who to trust, didn't know who, and I ran into some members here and there in passing in Rhode Island.
Yeah.
And
Those members were still there, right? Your old club still
oh
there.
sure. Yeah,
Like
sure.
when you go back now, do you get in contact or have contact with anybody that was in the club in Rhode Island?
Like
And
I
it's
said, I ran into a couple. I saw one at the mall. We kind of passed each other, did the head nod, kept going. And then oddly enough, in my timeline's just going to be a little mess, a mess at that. I ran into one of them at a meeting, at a recovery meeting. He was still a member. He was trying to get clean. I was clean, barely. I'm literally sitting in the front of the meeting. I turn around and I see him. I'm like, oh, here we go. Had no idea that he was there because he was, you know, trying to find recovery himself, right?
you're thinking
So we
he's
kind
trying to find you,
of,
right?
yeah, right, right. We kind of do the head nod as we pass each other, right? Like no words are spoken or anything. Like, yeah, hey, yeah. And then you hear stuff. You know what I mean? You hear stuff through the grapevine, and you hear, all sorts of stuff. And I didn't hear any bad. I heard things that, oh, so and so said, they wish you never left Rhode Island. You should have stayed here. You know what I mean? We would have taken care of you. You know what I mean? And I can tell you this. Let me flash back. However many years when we were still in the old club before we had turned over. I had a vicious habit, vicious, and I could not stop for anything. I was married at the time. I had a little girl who's now 38. I just couldn't stop, man. I just could not stop. And I remember going to my church. I remember going to meeting, a weekly meeting, and telling the guys like, listen, I can't stop doing. And apparently my kid and my wife don't matter enough. I said, but I know that this club does. So I need you guys to pass a rule that if I do again, that you're gonna beat the shit out of me and throw me the fuck out. And what they did was, not only did they not throw me out, but they decided to quit with me for 30 days.
Wow.
At the end of the 30 days, catch this, they 86 out of the charter permanently. Nobody can do in the charter anymore. Now, mind you, we can do every other right?
Like what? You could do
Yeah. But no, hey, and they literally, that rule stayed like that until years after I transferred to Manhattan. They still nobody was doing anymore.
That's a
And
good thing, though. That's a
yeah,
good
for
thing.
sure. But the point of the story is that was the real camaraderie that I had with the guys in Rhode Island, and then I fucked all of that up because I was so and decided to leave and want, you know what I mean? And that's where I heard stuff like, hey, he should have never left. But from through the grapevine afterwards, after I had been thrown out, people, hey, I ran into Mike and he said, the biggest mistake you made was leaving here. If you had stayed here, we would have taken care of you. You know what I mean? So I don't know how I went down that rabbit hole, but because I ran into him at the meeting, years
Yeah.
later when he's trying to get clean.
And did he spoke to you when you seen him?
Nah, it was just head nods. Just head nods, and we just kept moving.
Because he knew it was no contact, and they stuck
Exactly.
by that. They stuck
Yeah.
by that with you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Yep, yep.
'Cause I've heard
And
stories where a lot of people sneak phone calls or they'll talk to you and not tell the club, and
yeah, yeah, it didn't happen with me. You know what I mean? I really tried to stick to. I really believed in that life. You know what I mean? And I really believed that your word was your bond. So when I'm on the phone with them and they're saying, you know, we're gonna go our way, you go your, you know, what I mean, you stay on your side of the street, we'll stay on. I believe that I am truly like an honorable individual, right? And it was the drugs that got me all fucked up and caused me to that was dishonorable, right? So even though I'm thrown out and I'm not part, like even to this day, you will never hear me say a bad word about the club, and it's not out of fear. It's because I still think that they're the greatest motorcycle organization in the world. You know what I mean? From when I was around, I hear a lot of the stuff that goes on now, and maybe it's way different. Like I hear, folks that have been on your podcast, like even Pee Wee, we must have crossed paths. We had to. He was in Minnesota at the time that you know what I mean? So I don't know. I don't remember him. I doubt that he would remember me. You know what I mean? But I didn't experience all the stuff that he experienced afterwards. You know what I mean? Like about
well,
the
he
rubber.
was in Chicago, California,
Right, right.
Minnesota. He was all over
But
the
he
place.
started in Minnesota, which is where we got our patches. Was when we were in Minnesota. That's when they patched us in. So
Yeah.
we had to cross paths somewhere. But again, by the time he became a member, I was probably already out. And then all of the, I mean, the club today is definitely not what it was, back then. You know what I mean? And I'm not here to judge that or whatever, but you'll never hear me say anything bad about, the club. You know what I mean? And that, you know what I mean? That lifestyle is what it is. You know what I mean? And it is what it is, the way it is. You know what I mean? And you choose to be a part of that. And I still to this day feel that I'm the one that fell from grace. You know what I mean? So I don't have any animosity or any negative, feelings towards it. It was probably one of the greatest times of my life. It was probably one of the greatest achievements of my life. So I guess this is a long way of answering. When I was told you stay on your side of the street, we stay on it, that's what we did. You know what I mean? So I might have ran into people in passing, head nods were given, and we just went on our own way. Through the grapevine, I heard a lot of people say that You know, they were sorry for what had happened to me, that, you know, if I had just stayed in Providence, if, you know, they would have taken care of me. And, you know, who knows? Maybe it would have been true. You know what I mean?
Do you wish you could have went back and done it sober?
Don't we all? We woulda, coulda, shoulda, right? I don't think I could have done it. You know what I mean? I don't think I could have done it, you know, without, you know, how do you do that? You know what I mean? I've seen many, many people like that gentleman that I ran into. I ran into him at a meeting, and he struggled, you know, his whole life with that. You know what I mean? It's really hard. Let me correct myself.
It's
It's really
possible
hard
though.
for an
It is.
addict. It's
Yeah.
really hard for an addict to do that. There are people that are probably in the club that don't use, you know what I mean? But I don't believe that they're addicts, you know what I mean? If you're an addict, it's really, really difficult to, you know, put it down and keep it down, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I know how difficult it is. I'm an addict, so
right. Right. Did I hear? I think I just heard on one of your things late. Did you got like 3 years now or something? Did I
it's
hear that?
7
7 years.
years. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm probably watching old and I don't know it.
Probably. Yeah,
That's
probably you
awesome.
probably watched the show from like 3 years into my recovery.
Right. Right. That's awesome,
No,
bro.
thank you. Thank you. Congratulations on your sobriety. Do it again, like they say, right? Do it again. Tell me about the member from the other club that became an honorary Hell's Angel after he passed away.
From the original charter.
Yeah.
Yeah, good guy. You know what I mean? His name was Gary. He died. I wasn't with them. There were a bunch of them up in the Berkshires for something, some run, some something, some road. You know, late at night, sand on the road, hit some sand, went down. They said he had a gash like this big on the side of his head, but his brain swelled and died. Yeah, yeah, wicked good guy. I think he was the youngest out of all of us. Yeah, and
He didn't have a helmet on?
he did, he did. You know, it was one of those friggin', you know, half helmet. Probably
No.
wasn't a real one. You know what I mean? Like one of them flea market ones, because you know we all hated helmets, right? Now everybody's wearing them full faces, Simpsons.
Yeah.
But yeah, so and you know he passed away. You know he passed away when we were still, like I said, like the old the when we were still the Satan Serpents.
So when you
and
guys
we
it's
and we
over.
but we decided to patch him, you know, posthumously afterwards. I actually the artwork that's on his that was engraved in his tombstone. I was the one that drew all of that up for the tombstone. But
And the
yeah, young
Angels
kid,
were
really.
okay with that? The Angels were okay with
Well,
him
we did that after we became Hell's Angels. We did it after we were.
Oh,
As a
you guys
matter of fact, I'll,
yeah,
I'll
you guys
I'll
are
tell you
members.
this:
Yeah.
a, a, a bunch of them that came to his funeral actually put like Hell's Angel pins in his coffin with him, which is really, really, really ever done to somebody that's not a member yet. But there were a couple of people that put like Hell's Angel pins in his casket, and he was buried with that. So yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
And
yeah. So
was there any accidents during your time in the club?
meaning like bike accidents?
Yeah.
Well, his.
I mean, any with you.
No, you won't be jinxing me, damn it. So
What's it like to be riding in a pack with the brothers when you were in the club?
let me tell you what I've experienced some epic, epic stuff. Just like out of a out of a Hollywood movie type experiences. So after we got our patches, the very first run we went on was the South Run down in Myrtle Beach. You know, and you know when you're hanging around your prospect, you need to be from point A to point B at whatever time you're told to. And it doesn't matter if it's raining, snowing, a hurricane, or you better be there, right? So we would drive. I remember one time we were going somewhere and we're literally like sideways down the highway because the friggin' wind is so bad. And normally, what we used to do when this is how old, right? This will give you a little age dating here. When you actually used to have to put money in the toll booths, so
Yeah.
you'd have somebody go up ahead of you, get to the toll booth, tell them I got 10 people, pay for the 10 people, and then you would just rip through it. So we get to this one toll booth and we get stopped and we're like, what the hell's going on? Right. And we see him talking and this thing. And the next thing you know, goes like this. And so everybody starts flying down. going sideways. And then we pull over at the next gas stop, and we're like, what the hell was that all about? And he goes, "Oh, the lady was telling us that the road was closed because there were tornadoes going down the road."
Oh, so you have to wait. You gotta wait, right?
Yeah, but we
Until the
didn't. But we didn't. We're going down the road. Trailer trucks are pulled over. We're like, "What the hell's going on?" So we pull over in a gas station, and that's when he tells us that there's tornadoes going. So like when you were hanging around a prospect and you needed to be somewhere, you better get there early. You know what I mean? And I remember our first run after we got our patches was the South Run down in Myrtle Beach. Hey, if it looked like it was going to rain, we'd pull over into a hotel and we'd just party. And we get up the next day and go a little bit further. I'm sorry. I forgot what the hell your question was.
when you have your patches on, like some of the things that you experience with your
Yeah.
patches on, like
Oh
places
yeah.
you've been.
So that was pretty cool. And then one of the other things that was, so we were down on the South Run, I believe it was called, and that one, and the cops are everywhere. You know what I mean? And they're always surveilling us, and they're always got set up and whatnot. So we do like this little meeting, and we're gonna we decide to all go out. You know what I mean? We're all going out. There was probably 150 of us. Get on the bikes. We come out of the thing, and you start seeing like all the law enforcement agencies starting to scramble to get in their cars to follow us. And we literally just got on the bikes and we went from wherever the hotel was right down to the strip in Myrtle Beach. And we didn't stop for anything. Red lights, stop signs, nothing. We just, it was a slow procession, but the whole pack just went, and they didn't stop us. You know what I mean? They didn't do anything. We got down there. They, did all their whatever they did. We kind of, split up and who went back when they went back. And then the next day, we have like this little huddle, and we're like, okay, we're going to do it again. We're going to, jump on the bikes. We're going to get ready. Like we're all going out. We're going to go out this side of the parking lot. We're going to go around the block, and we're going to come back into the parking lot just to fuck with the cops. And it was hilarious.
They're all getting ready.
Oh yeah, they're running around and whatnot. Yep, yep. And then, like I told you, I was the East Coast rep to Canada, so I had flown out. So I got very close with a lot of the guys in Canada. So for the World Run, which was in San Francisco that year, I flew out to British Columbia, and it was for our 1 year anniversary in Providence. They got me a bike to use, and I drove from British Columbia down to San Francisco. That's where the World Run was that year, and that was another one of the coolest experiences that I ever had, was being in that pack going over the Golden Gate Bridge. You know what I mean? Like being in California where it all started. It was like so nostalgic. You know what I mean? Just being in that pack, going over that bridge and coming down into San Francisco. And I got to experience a lot of really cool. As a matter of fact, on that run in Seattle, I ran into Sonny up there because they were just starting that charter up in Seattle. So he was up there checking them out. I got to meet him on several occasions. And what I remember the most of him was he used to always give me shit because I smoked cigarettes. And he was like, and he had the throat cancer, and he'd be like, "Do you want to end up like this? You know what I mean? You need to knock that shit off." And stuff. He said, "While you're young, you need to stop smoking." Yeah, cool guy. I met him on several different occasions. And it was just something else. And I got to experience a lot of stuff like that. You know what I mean? Going out to California, riding all over the place, and USA runs, world runs, stuff like that. Me and one of the members actually had a t-shirt company. We used to call it. They used to say that him and we were like thick as thieves. And they used to say that they used to call us the entrepreneurs, right? Like we literally, like we take your shirt off your back and sell it back to you, right? We'd find $20 on the floor, we'd rip it in half. He'd keep 20 in his wallet, and I'd keep 20 in mine. And then when we were broke, we'd get the 20 out, we'd go buy some, go to the bar or whatever. And so we had a t-shirt company called Beep T-shirts. It was Billy Andre and Al Preneur, because we were the entrepreneurs. And I actually got to do the World Run T-shirts for the World Run that year, which I think probably would have been '93 or something like that. We got to design those, for the club and stuff like that. So a lot of really cool like memories, and just what I mean, like once in a lifetime, like been there, done that type of stuff. I got in a short amount of time, I got to experience a lot of really cool stuff. Got to meet a lot of people that were are absolute legends in the history of that motorcycle club.
Did you have any drama with people in your time going to different charters? Was there anybody you were butting heads with?
Not in particular. No, most of my butting heads was within my own charter. And again, you know what I mean. At the time, I would tell you that it was all them, but it was probably a lot me too. You know what I mean? Because again, it was fucking high all the time. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah,
What?
no. I had great experiences. I did so much traveling, and and especially Canada was just, oh my god, they were unbelievable. When they didn't even roll out the red carpet, they rolled out the gold carpet. They just, when I went up there for my honeymoon, I could not take $1 out of my pocket the whole time I was there. Paid for hotel room, champagne, dinners, anything, motors, whatever you wanted. They just, they gave you, and that's the way it was pretty much anywhere when you went and visited a charter. Canada, it was like tenfold. They just rolled it out for you. Absolutely
Yeah, they
amazing.
wherever you go, they pay for dinner and everything,
Everything,
right?
everything. Sent me, we were brand new charter. We got our patches in September. I got married in October, so maybe 2 months. They sent me home with like 4 dozen shirts. You know what I mean? It was just, any bad experience that I had in the club really kind of just came from my own, mistakes. But no, I mean, I was always welcomed with open arms no matter where we went. You know what I mean? It was probably one of the coolest parts of being part of that organization is you could go anywhere and they would roll out the red carpet for you. And same thing like when people came, to our charter, in
Yeah.
Providence or when I was in New York City. You know what I mean? You took care of those people. So
Did citizens treat you different with your patch on when you go
sure,
places?
sure. Yeah, sure. For the most part, you know what I mean? They'd kind of, treat you well. Every once in a while, you'd get somebody that wanted to, challenge you, right? You know what I mean? Because of who you were. And it was usually some drunk, or somebody that was drunk. But yeah, absolutely. But most of the time it was good. You know what I mean? Most of the time it was good. But yeah, I don't really, I mean, even getting thrown out, even spending 29 days in the hospital, even having my tattoos burnt off, you know what I mean? Was all a result of what my actions were. You know what I mean? So I have no animosity, no. And again, I was out of the club way before, a lot of these guys, that maybe feel a little bit differently than I do. And the club has definitely changed. I still think it's the greatest motorcycle organization in the world. Still do. You know what I mean? And I still cherish that I was able to be a part of it for a small time in my life. You know what I mean? And I think that all of that, all of what happened to me, like I said at the beginning, you know what I mean? All of what happened to me, including being thrown out, struggling for maybe a decade, then finding my way into recovery, and then the 16 years that have gone in that have all made me the person that I am today. All of that has, you know what I mean? I
Yeah.
wouldn't be who I am today without, if one single part of any of that was missing, I'd be a different person. So
How
I
did
think,
how did you find recovery?
whew. um, you want me to give you the textbook answer? Through God's grace and mercy. So I mentioned my brother early on, the one that I had said, we were like 9 years apart, but once we got to a certain age, I was able to start hanging out with him. Well, he ended up passing away. At the time, my parents would probably have told you that he died from results of his diabetes, but really he died from, uh, you know, direct result of the disease of addiction. I looked the most like him out of my brothers. I hung with him the most because we were closest in age. I drank the same whiskey that he drank, and he died. And probably a couple of years after that, I just remember waking up from like a bender, looking in the mirror, and I could, like, I was looking at him, and I was like, if I don't do something, I'm gonna die just like he did. And I literally opened up a phone book and started looking at treatments. I knew nothing. I knew nothing about AA, NA, treatment, none
Yeah,
of
you
it.
said you didn't even know you were an addict for a long time,
No,
right?
no, I knew nothing about any of that. And I opened a phone book and I found a treatment center and I went. Because I literally thought if I didn't do something, I was going to die. I called my oldest brother, who I've always been the closest to, and he kind of like helped me like get through it. And I went to detox, got out of there. I stayed clean for 3.5 years. Got my 1 year medallion at my home group, got my 2 year medallion at my home. By the time my 3rd year came around, I wasn't going to meetings anymore. I put everything in front of my recovery. 3 years, 5 months, and 7 days into that, I relapsed, used for a year and a half, and man, it was the worst year and a half of my. They say that you pick up right where you left off.
Yeah.
And I went to places that I never thought I would ever. It got
You
so
lose
bad.
everything, right? You lose everything.
Everything and then some. Literally everything and then some. And I can tell you, and I don't mean to be corny with it, that if you asked me how I found my way back, I really would tell you that I found my way back through God's grace and mercy and the people in the fellowship of Narcotics Anonymous that were praying for the sick and suffering addict when I was sick. I had no intentions of I was in my car and I really wanted to drive it into a tree. I just was so desperate. Thought that this doesn't work for me. You know what I mean? I'm destined to just be miserable and fucking live my life out like this. And I ended up in the same treatment center. Thank God for my brother. Same treatment center, same counselors sitting there saying, "This ain't gonna work. Did this before. This ain't gonna work." A commitment came in, and I picked up a reading, and I started doing the reading, and I just started crying uncontrollably. And I was like, "Why did I ever stop?" I knew that was the solution. I knew it as soon as I read that, and I was like, "Why did I ever stop doing this?" And I recommitted myself to it. The first time I skimmed the surface of everything, and this time I really recommitted myself. And there was a gentleman in the treatment center that I ended up going to who really touched my spirit, made me decide to change careers. I said I wanted to work in treatment. A year after I celebrated my first year, I got a job as a recovery aide. I went back to school. I became a licensed substance abuse counselor. I was one of the very first certified addiction recovery coaches in the state of Massachusetts. My certification is number 10 in the state of Massachusetts. And I've been doing that ever since for the past 15 years. And I live a life second to none. Let me tell you. Whew.
It is. It's like night and day compared to when you're on or drinking compared to now and the life that you've lived sober, right?
Yeah. And though I still stick to my resolve that everything that I went through in my life allows me to have the life that I have. To the ups, the downs, the bad, everything has formed or shaped me into the person that I am today. I've never had any animosity to the club. I've reconnected with some folks. One of the guys that I was in the Providence charter who's been out for a while, him and I are buddies again, and we've rode together. I reconnected with Pat out in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Pat, a Pee Wee story, right?
He told on a lot of people, man. He
Yeah.
told on a lot of members.
Yeah. Well, to me though, bro, you know what I mean? It's
He told on Pee Wee.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. Did you see that interview I did with Pee Wee about that?
The only interview I saw with Pee Wee was the one that you did with Pee Wee and is it Repo? Yes,
I have probably 20 with Pee Wee.
Yeah.
I have a
So
lot.
you know what I need to do is I need to subscribe to the damn channel because all I catch is the little pieces here and there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know. I know that. He says that he gave up a couple of people. And
20
yeah,
20
I don't
members.
know. I don't know of that and I don't, you know what I mean? If I'm in the club, I'm gonna say, yeah, that right.
Yeah.
But
I'm not in a club either. Let me make that clear out there to the
I
people.
know,
I'm not.
but being who I am today, you know what I mean? I'm like, I'm sure there's gonna be some people that see this and say this piece of shit. You know what I mean? I cop to what I did. You know what I mean? I took that. I can try and paint it however I wanted. I can try and tell you that I had all intentions to paying him back,
And
and I
it
wasn't
feels
trying to rob his
embarrassing to
money,
even
and
admit
I
that.
did pay him back. But the reality of it is, I took that money without him knowing. It's stealing. You know what I mean? And so I can paint it however I want. It's what it is. You know what I mean? I've moved past it, and then unfortunately, I look at like so many people that got thrown out of the that didn't even get thrown out of the club, that left the club in good standings, and then were thrown, that
Yeah.
didn't deserve it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But anyways, my point being, I try not to sit and judge. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What Pat did, what I did, what you know what I mean? Just I just try not. You know what I mean? I try not to judge. You know what I
How
mean?
many people in your original charter are still in the club?
None, none. Um, four of them are dead. The original members. So four have passed away.
There was 8, right, to start with?
Well, yeah, 9, but 8. Yes, we did the one
Mhm.
posthumously. So there was 8. We threw one out while I was still in Rhode Island, and then 4 of them. Well, he died, not when we threw him out, but so he's gone. Carl died, Eddie died, and Mike died. So that was 4. So there's 4 that are still alive, but none are in the club, and all of them were out bad, except I heard one of the members that originally was out bad, and they changed the status back to good.
Does it
Uh,
even matter though? The how
I
good and how bad? It's not like you're gonna go back there and have a drink with them or do it like it.
right,
It doesn't matter.
right, right, right. Yeah, no, it doesn't. It doesn't. I mean, I maybe I'm lying. You know what I mean? In a small way, sure. You know what I mean? Although I just saw, I think his name was Ed from California. He
Yeah,
had the
Ed.
black hat. He had the
I
black
inter-
hat on. He said that Pee Wee gave him that says "out bad."
yeah, I interviewed Ed too. Yeah,
Yeah, that's where
shout
I
out to
saw him.
Ed.
That's where I saw him. I saw
Yeah,
him on.
he had a shirt on that said "Out Bad." The
Oh, I didn't.
5.
I could.
What is
I
it?
could.
The 516 crew Out Bad or
Oh no, son.
what
Oh yeah, I have no idea. Yeah, no idea.
it's
But the
yeah, yeah,
difference, but the difference between them is they didn't get thrown out bad. They all left and then they changed their status. I got
yeah.
thrown out. You know what I mean? There's a difference in that. You know what I mean? In some ways, there's a shame that I carry with that.
So
But
if
it's not my life today. You know what I mean? My life is, and I feel that it's come full circle because I've actually been able to help a couple of guys that lived that same. I remember when I talked to this one dude and he goes, "Listen, I've talked to a whole bunch of people, but none of them have really sat at the table." He said, "And the word I heard was that you sat at the same table as I did and you're clean today." And I'm like, "I am." And then he asked me a whole bunch of questions. What should I, and I was able to, possibly help them a little bit. You know what I mean? Maybe help them stay clean for another day. Who knows?
what would you say to someone that's watching this? Maybe they're still in the club and they want to get sober.
I don't know. I have no idea. I think it's really difficult to live, to live that life and be sober. I think it's really, really difficult. I don't think it's impossible. I'm sure there are. I don't know personally any members from the Hells Angels. I don't know any personal members that are sober today. I do know a guy that's in another one of the top 4. I mean, he's clean, but it's hard, man. It's really, really hard. And in fact, if you watch that the Patch podcast, and they go through a couple of people that, you know what I mean, were able to get sober after they left. It'd be a tough balance. You know what I mean? It's a really tough
Yeah.
balance. And throw this factor into it, right? If you're in a 12-step fellowship or something similar to that, right? It's about living a spiritual life, right? It's about, becoming this different type of. So how can you be spiritual, Bill, 1 minute and cracking somebody in the head with a ball peen hammer the next? You know what I mean? It doesn't
Yeah,
really fit,
yeah,
right?
you're
Um,
right.
but I mean, you could certainly be abstinent, you know what I mean? And your life would probably still be better if you were abstinent. I don't know, really, really tough, really tough. It can happen. I'm sure
Yeah.
it can happen.
But you're right though. I'm sober, but here, let's go beat the shit out of
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
What about somebody who's thinking about joining a club? What would be your advice to them?
You asked that, and in my head it spins. Why should I be giving advice to anybody?
Because you've
I,
been there
I
and done that,
I think you need to follow your heart, man. I think you need to. Did you say somebody that was sober that wanted to join a club,
No, or if they're
or
on
just
drugs,
anybody else?
yeah, anybody out there that may be thinking about joining a club, what would
Yeah,
be your
yeah,
advice to
yeah.
them?
I do know one guy that was actually a member of the fellowship that I belong to, the 12-step fellowship that I belong to, who actually did become a Hell's Angel. I don't know if he's still sober or not. I know through the whole process he was great guy, awesome guy. I've had some interactions with him because we knew each other when when we were both in that same fellowship, and then he left to prospect and everything. I've had a couple of run-ins with him, and they've all been really positive. He's even said, he said every once in a while your name does come up in certain circles, and what he said made me feel really good. He goes, and it's never in a bad way. You know what I mean? So why that's still important to me today, I can't tell you, but it is. That part of my life will be forever embedded in me. A sponsor that I used to have said, we're like, when it comes to that, we're like moths to a flame. You know what I mean? I get on YouTube and I start watching, and the next thing you know, I'm like, oh, what? I think you got to follow your heart. You know what I mean? If that's what you want to do and you truly want to do it, like, do it. You know what I mean? I think we all know that the club that I joined, in 1992 is not the same club that it is today, but I still think it's the greatest motorcycle organization in the world. I will always think that. I think that anybody can go become a doctor or a lawyer if you study hard enough. And not everybody can get into that lifestyle and become what they want to become. I still think it was a great achievement. I still have reoccurring dreams 29 years later. That's how much a part of your life it becomes. So if somebody asked me that, I would say, follow your dreams, do it. If that's what you think you want to do, go do it. You know what I mean?
But when you're ripped from it, though, it's kind of like breaks your heart too, right?
Crushed, absolutely crushed. There's so many people that I miss that you know what I mean? They can't talk to me. I can't talk to them. You know what I mean? Once in a blue moon, you'll run into somebody. You know what I mean? But you know what I mean? When you're in, you're in. When you're out, you're out, and that's all there is
But it,
to it. You just got to
but
kind
it's
of.
been such a turnover with people. Pretty almost everybody from back when you were in it are either no longer in it. Maybe there's a handful of people still.
In the Providence charter, there's nobody. There's a couple of guys that are still members there that kind of came along, and I know who they are, but there are no original members left.
What about New York? Do you think there's still original members from when you were in that are
Yeah,
still there?
there are still guys there. Yeah, there's still some there. Yes, but
And they're not even in the same clubhouse anymore. It's totally
no, not
different.
anymore. No, no. I
It's in
I,
the
I
Bronx
actually
now.
I actually went down to Manhattan for an NA convention maybe a month ago, and of course, like a moth to a flame, I had to go see the old place. And I only went because I knew that it was sold, and you know what I mean. And that was, once again, you know what I mean. This is the grip and the hold that it has, right? I started across the street, taking a couple of pictures of the building, and then I crossed the street, and what used to be the steel door is now just a glass door. And don't you fucking know the thing's open? And guess who had to walk in?
Did you?
Walked in, took a, it's obviously it's all apartments now. I used to live on the 5th floor front, but went up to the stairs that I must have walked up and down hundreds of times, took a couple of pictures, and then, hey, you're gonna laugh. So I'm walking out. I'm like, all right, that's enough. Let's get the fuck out of here. I get to the door, it's locked. And for a half a second, hey, last time I'm in this hallway, I'm bloodied, beaten, tattoos burnt off, right? The door's locked. I can't open the door. And for a half a second, I
Yeah,
panicked.
panic
And I look,
attack.
I look to the right, and there's a button that says push to unlock.
It flashed you back to that time, right? You're
Hey,
like,
That,
Are they
yeah,
upstairs? You're
pushed
like,
the thing, opened it. I was like, oh. And I still haven't figured out whether it was, healing or what. You know what I mean? But I went down, I checked it out. Like I said, I took some pictures in front of the building and stuff, and then I took a walk through St. Mark's Place and went by a couple of there was the bodega that I used to go to and the bar and whatnot, and the whole neighborhood changed and everything. And then walked back up and everything, but that's just goes to show you how much of a hold that it has on your soul, your being. You know what I mean? It was just such a friggin' part, defined who I was and even though it wasn't that long of a time, and then I've heard, other stories too of members that I really like. In my mind, they were legends, and they were just, you know what I mean? And, you know, from watching different podcasts, you know what I mean? Oh, he's out bad. He's out bad. I'm gonna be out what? You know what I mean? Just crazy. You know what I mean? Just crazy, crazy stuff.
you didn't see
So
this type of stuff happen to anybody else when you were in the club? Like,
be thrown
them
out.
be thrown out with your tattoos removed and
I've seen there was one member before me in New York City that got thrown out. I think they just covered his tattoo. I think I wasn't there when it happened. It might even happen before I transferred down there. But I mean, sure. I mean, we threw a guy out of Providence when I was still a member of Providence. We threw him out. Wasn't certainly as dramatic as my exit. He got his tattoo covered and that was it. I don't even think he got beat up, to be honest with you. So yeah, I mean, it certainly it happened for sure. You know what I mean? It definitely happened here and there.
it's crazy because I was a part of a street gang and they terminated me with the street gang. They beat the out of me, almost
Yeah,
killed me.
yeah,
And
yeah.
then they wanted me to come back and I'm like, "Nah, I'm good. I'm good." And I had to go to prison without the gang with me. So I have a lot of similarities,
Yeah.
but I do this show to show people that it's not a gang. It's a motorcycle club. I signed up to be in a gang.
Mm,
You signed up to be in a motorcycle club.
yeah.
What do you think
Yeah.
for the people that say it's a criminal organization and they call it a gang? What do you think about that?
I think that the everything that you've heard, all I'll do is I'll quote, both Sonny and George, that, you know what I mean? It's not a criminal organization. It's an organization that has criminals in it. You know what I mean? In the way that I've always understood it, and then I'll tell you a side story. Um, is that because there isn't a top-down hierarchy, that's what makes it not a criminal, or you know what I mean? Like, remember in the beginning of this, when I was talking about the guys that like worked for Caterpillar and Blue, they had legit jobs. You know what I mean? That's what they did. You know what I mean? So we had plenty of people in there that were like that. You know what I mean? Not and to me, a criminal organization is you go out and make money, and that has to get filtered into that organization, and it usually goes up a chain to a head.
The
And
top guy, yeah.
the Hell's Angels are not like that at all. So the dictionary definition of a criminal organization, no, it's not. But it's an organization that has criminals in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think there's proof in the pudding. You know what I mean? They've tried the RICO Act a million times. They've had very little, if any, success with it. And there's a reason behind that. You know what I mean? Because it's not a criminal organization. You know what I mean? It's just it in its purest form. It is a brotherhood of people who love to ride motorcycles and have the camaraderie and brotherhood, amongst one another. You know what I mean? To celebrate one another and enjoy times, with one another. You know what I mean? And that's what it is at its purest form. Does it get corrupted and skewed? Yeah, it does, because of personalities, right? But for the most part, like I always say that, like, here's perfect and here's where the Hell's Angels are. You know what I mean? And then maybe other organizations further away. You know what I mean? As far as I know, there are other motorcycle clubs that kind of do have that hierarchy, and maybe they can get like busted under the RICO thing and whatnot. But no, I don't. I certainly didn't. I joined it for my love of riding motorcycles and to be part of a brother. And I know that there are others that, don't feel that that's what it is, or maybe it isn't anymore. When I joined it, that's exactly what it was. You know what I mean? It was, to me, it was still in its purest form. Is it perfect? No. You know what I mean? You throw money, drugs, and into any equation, it's gonna skew people. It just is. We're human. It happens in recovery.
Yeah. I mean, look what happens in the rooms when people start
Right.
sleeping with each other and things
Right.
like.
Right. We're all human beings. But yeah, no, I think in its purest form. And has it changed over the years? Yeah, it probably has. You know what I mean? It's probably grown in numbers, but possibly, lessened maybe in all the other stuff, you know what I mean, with it. But you know what I mean? I've never found any reason whatsoever to have a bad word come out of my mouth about that organization. You know what I mean? When I joined it, it was everything that I believed that it would be and more. You know what I mean? And in my head, I fell from grace in that organization. Today, I'll tell you, I'm glad that that happened. You know what I mean? Because I would not probably have the life that I have today. I would probably be dead or in jail. You know, for the rest of my life. And you know what I mean? I live a charmed life today. You know what I mean? And but again, like I said earlier, all because of everything I went through, the good, the bad, the ugly. You know what I mean? Made my life what it is today.
What about the problems that they have with other clubs? There's a lot of wars going on and people getting shot and killed and fights happening in gas stations like on Long Island recently. There's a lot. Do you think peace is possible with other motorcycle clubs?
I don't know.
Or is it a big swinging contest?
I don't think it's that. I think it certainly can be, a personality thing. I you would think after all these years you'd be able to come together, you know what I mean, and have a I don't know what you want to call front, a united front, right? Against, the society, you know what I mean, that you are rebelling against. But it's been tried over and over and over and over again. There's been truths, there's been, have you ever had George on your
No,
podcast?
no. I'm
He
working on it. I'm working on
Yeah.
it. George, I need you on the podcast. He's probably the only person I haven't had on the podcast
I'll
yet.
message him when I get off.
Yeah,
Not that he's
definitely.
gonna listen to me. But he was a guy that, tried for the longest time. You know what I mean? And I my experience is that there's been many truces, and in my experience and knowledge, it was usually, I want to say us, but I'm not part of them anymore. It's usually them that have broken it in the past. But there are also reasons behind that, right? For instance, this whole thing, my understanding of the whole thing with the Outlaws, right? When it started in New York. The Outlaws have their version. The Angels have their version. The Angels didn't, and my understanding is the Angels did not know that the Outlaws had declared war. And there was a member from Lowell, and Lowell were our sponsors, and that's kind of why I know some of this history. Two members from Lowell went down to Florida to check on a member that was no longer in the club that was supposed to have his tattoos covered. So they went down there to make sure he had his tattoos covered, and I believe it was Whiskey George. I can't remember the other guy's name. They went down there because we used to hang out and we used to party with the Outlaws. And there was something that happened when one of the Outlaws was up in New York. He
Yeah, he
claims
got
that
got punched or
yeah, he
something,
claimed
or
he claimed he got jumped or whatever. But unbeknownst to the folks that were going to, because they never said, "Hey, we're at war with you." These two members from Lowell went down there, found this ex-member, were all in the Outlaws clubhouse, hanging out and partying because they used to hang out and party with them. And my understanding is that they, got jumped, hogtied, brought to a rock quarry, and all three of them were killed. When I was around and then in the club, the guys in Lowell would always say there's never going to be a truce. You know what I mean? And then maybe a vote would be taken, right? And they would be outvoted and like, okay, we're going to have a truce. And then something would always break it. Same thing. So I guess the answer to your question is I'm going to say probably no, because there's always going to be somebody on one side or the other that's going to break it for one reason or the other.
Yeah, but they're all the same types of people. I've met
100%.
outlaws too, and they're great people. They're not
Absolutely.
they're like no different from the angels that I've spoken to.
Absolutely. Right. George is known for saying that if I grew up in Chicago instead of California, there's more of a chance that I probably would have been an outlaw and not, you know what I mean? Absolutely they are. You know what I mean? But then you add ego, throw a little whiskey and a little onto the thing, and you know what I mean? Everything's hunky dory 1 minute, and the next thing it's like you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
I don't know. You know what I mean? How about this? If there ever was, imagine the strength that they would have,
huge.
right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's kind of
definitely.
crazy. You know,
Even
I
just those two organizations would be huge.
boys will be boys though, right?
I guess so. Yeah,
Listen, you throw money, power, and into any situation, and you know what I mean? It's just
powder keg for
yeah,
disaster.
yep.
So what's in store for the future for you?
I'm getting a little long in the tooth. And because of my past life, I didn't really plan on retirement or anything like that. But just recently, I started working for a new company. You know, I work in the treatment field, and I started working for a new company. And one of the co-founders was actually a client of mine for like 4 years. I became very close to him and his family. So when they started this new company, I was one of the first people that they hired. The future of that looks very, very promising, not only for them, but for me as well. I'm clean, man. You know what I mean? I'll be celebrating 17 years in March. I love the
Congratulations.
fact that I'm clean. I still travel all over the world. I still ride my motorcycle all over the place. Getting ready to go down to Biketoberfest down in Florida. I honestly, you know what I mean? My whole I don't know if it'll ever, come to being. I'd love to write a book someday. My sister-in-law, who's recently passed, she's written a couple of different books. My brother and her are both doctors of Chinese medicine. They do acupuncture and whatnot, and so she's written a couple of different storybooks, but also she has written textbooks. And she was always one that told me that I needed to write a story about my life, and I've always wanted to. And the theme, because you want to write something that's going to sell, right? So you got to have a little bit of a hook. And so my idea, and I could probably never name it this, but it would be from HA to NA, one man spiritual journey through life. You know what I mean?
You could
How
name
I
it that. You could name it
man,
that.
man, that would copyright. I don't think you can.
They don't they don't own the word HA. They don't you can't copyright just them two words like that.
They have the copyright on Hell's Angels and the Death
Yeah.
Cab.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but just to use
yeah,
the word HA, you can
yeah,
use that in a
yeah.
book title. Listen,
Um,
I own the rights for Uber Mafia. People were like, "You can't do that because of Uber. Uber owns Uber, the word Uber." No, they don't. I copyrighted the word Uber Mafia because I have a series called Uber Mafia about these
right.
mob guys that start driving for Uber.
I gotta see if I can find this thing. I'm not gonna be able to find it too quick.
That's awesome.
So I would like to, pursue that. And really, again, you know what I mean? Like, even doing this with you, my main goal really was to, for it to come out that you can survive after, you know what I mean? That there's life after club life, you know what I mean? And there's life in recovery. Like, I live a life second to none today. You know what I mean? Like, the relationships that I destroyed from being in the club, like my parents, my siblings, my daughter. I was an absentee father forever. And because I found recovery, I was able to make amends to her. She was not raised by me. She was raised by her mother, her stepfather, and my parents. When she was getting married, the hardest question I had to ask her was, are you going to have me walk you down the aisle, or are you going to have Mike walk you down the aisle? And we had already made amends, like, through some time. And she's
Yeah.
like, what do you mean? Of course I'm going to have you, you know what I mean? So I have a relationship with my daughter today because of my recovery. My brother, who's a judge, believe it or not, in the state of Rhode Island, we were like this forever. And even when I first got, when I got clean, he handed me $15. He said, get the fuck out of my house. I hope you straighten your life out. And then even after I'd been clean for a while, this is bull. This kid needs to straighten his life, just was so totally against it. And he went from that to, I was at my mom's once working on some stuff, and I had some Narcan sitting on the table. And he started talking to me, and he said, hey, can you get me some of this? And I'm like, huh? My brother makes sure that all the court officers in his court all carry Narcan today. If you go to my brother's house, where he has like his college degree and his law, his little shrine to self, right? He's got my 1-year medallion, my 10-year medallion, my 15-year medallion.
That's awesome.
I've been able to mend those relationships. Those are the things that are, I got a brand new motorcycle. I just bought a brand new car last week, fucking, but the things that are most important to me today are those relationships. And so my goal, partly in doing this, and this is why I really want to do the patched one, is that I want to be able to reach people like me that get out of organizations like I was in, and they're lost, and they can get buried in alcohol because they don't know which direction to go. And I want to be able to help those people and show them that, you know what, there is life after that. You know what I mean? And so far, I've met 2 people, you know what I mean, that were in, one that was actually in the Providence charter and one that was in Boston, I believe. At least one of them tells me, in fact, he picked me up at the airport once. He said, he said, if I hadn't met you when I had like 2 months, he goes, I probably wouldn't have stuck around. He said, I didn't think this was possible for people like me and you. So that's my goal. You know what I mean? That's my goal. You know what I mean? Is to try and help others that were like-minded like me. You know what I mean? Find that there is, you know what I mean? I put 26,000 miles on my motorcycle like a year ago. You know what I mean? I didn't do that when I was in the club. So I'm living life, man. You know what I mean? I got a good life. You know what I mean? And I got good friends, and we ride bikes together, and we go shooting, and we go snowboarding, and we hang out, and we barbecue, and life is good today. And so that's what my hope is. You know what I mean? That through my work, and through my personal life, that I can help other people like me find a new path in their lives.
Definitely. I appreciate you telling your story, man. It's been a pretty intricate story, and you came out on top.
If there's an on top.
Hey, you're sober, you're living life, you got
I'm not
relationships
fucking
back.
jail, and
You could be dead,
for sure.
Is there anyone you want to give a shout out to before we go?
Really, all the people that have helped me along the way on this path. You know what I mean? From my brothers, my daughter, my sponsors, my friends. All of those people that have just been there for me, because it's not easy, man. You know what I mean? Some days I don't want to get out of bed. You know what I mean? Some days I get so wrapped up in my past and feeling fucking so down about that on myself, that I don't want to, you know what I mean? So, you know what I mean? My friends and my family, you know what I mean? My daughter, Nicole, my brothers, Anthony and Joe, the ones that are still alive, my friends, all over the place, the people that believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, man, so.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you like this show, hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you can get my videos every time they drop. And if you don't like this show, too bad. Start your own podcast. Peace.